Hey, hi, hello. Welcome to Diana Emerson. Today we are going to listen to Twisted Cases. Okay, this one is Brooke Baker. There's another one I want to go back and find.
I'm going to give up my life. I have to trust somebody. I can't live without justice for Brooke. I can't go on with my own life. That's all I can think. I want justice.
The morning of September 6, 1997 began casually for 19-year-old Brooke Baker, a student of journalism at Vincennes University, Indiana. Her investigation into a date drug used by some campus fraternity guys had caused some friction between her and the fraternity guys. Despite their threats, she was determined to expose their crimes, which earned her praise from her journalism teachers. On September 7, 1997, Brooke's 18-year-old brother, Braun Baker, stopped for a visit at her house off campus as they normally did. They had a strong bond, and he had a key to her home. But when he called out her name, he received no response. As he ventured deeper into the house, what he saw left him haunted forever. What did Braun Baker see in his sister's home that distressed him so much? Or was he just hallucinating? Today's story takes us to the historic city of Vincennes in Knox County, Indiana. Founded by French fur traders in 1732, Vincennes was the site of several important events during the American Revolution and the Northwest Indian War. Vincennes is also the oldest continually inhabited European settlement in Indiana and has a rich and diverse heritage. According to the 2020 census, the city has a population of 16,000, steadily decreasing since the 1990s. With its location on the Wabash River, the city offers a variety of recreational attractions to residents and visitors alike. Vincennes had a relatively high crime rate in 1997, with a violent crime rate of 514.6 per 100,000 people. It was this city that was Brooke Baker's home. Brooke Elizabeth Baker was born on April 24, 1978, in Vincennes, Indiana. She was the daughter of Janet and Maurice Baker. She grew up in a low-income family with her parents and younger brother Braun, but she never let that stop her from pursuing her dreams. Brooke's heart beat with a passion for words. From a young age, she dreamt of becoming a writer, using the power of storytelling to captivate and inspire. In August 1996, she embarked on a new chapter as she was accepted into Vincennes University, Indiana's oldest college. Brooke studied journalism and wrote for the campus newspaper, The Trailblazer. She was an ambitious and talented reporter and wasn't afraid to tackle controversial topics.
Brooke was kind, loving, smart, knew what she wanted out of life.
Brooke was also a friendly and outgoing person who made friends easily and enjoyed life. She was close to her family and often called her mother to chat and share her feelings. She hoped to transfer to a bigger university after completing her 2-year program at Vincennes. Brooke was living with a friend and his roommates while attending university and was dating another student casually. But her main focus was her career as a writer. She wanted to cover hard-hitting stories for the school paper, especially about the fraternities on campus. They had a lot of influence and also a lot of scandals. No one doubted that Brooke had a bright future ahead of her, but little did anyone know that her zeal to cover hard-hitting stories would lead to a tragic outcome. In the spring of 1997, 19-year-old Brooke began working on an investigative story about an assault case that had happened at a frat house. The campus fraternity involved in the matter had covered up the crime. Some of Brooke's friends were in that fraternity, but they didn't want to talk about it. Brooke managed to identify the victim and tried to interview her, but the victim backed out after being pressured by the fraternity members. Brooke spoke to several women who had similar encounters with the frat members. However, the fraternity did not appreciate her probing into the case. They sent her threatening messages and emails, warning her to stop the investigation. However, Brooke was not one to be intimidated and continued her investigation, but her mother, Janet Baker, was worried about her well-being. Brooke assured her mother that she was pursuing the story to prevent others from being harmed. But the warnings continued. One time, Brooke was at a friend's place when a truck full of frat guys showed up and threatened her. Brooke's friends were concerned about her, and in July 1997, for safety reasons, Brooke moved to a new apartment off campus where the landlord was a campus cop. But come what may, she was determined to expose the truth and refused to give up on the story. On September 7th, 1997, Brooke's 18-year-old brother, Bron Baker, visited her at her off-campus house. The siblings were very close, and he had a key to her place. He called her name, but got no reply. He noticed that the water was running in the bathroom and turned it off. He went further into the house, looking for his sister. But what he found in Brooke's house was a horrifying scene. Bron Baker, overwhelmed with grief upon discovering his sister's tragic fate, somehow managed to compose himself enough to call the police. When the police arrived at the scene, they found Brooke lying naked on a mattress in her bedroom. She'd been stabbed multiple times and bore bruises suggesting she'd been tied up and assaulted. There was no sign of forced entry in the house, but the injuries on her arms were enough evidence of a fierce fight between Brooke and her killer.
I went up to a state policeman and I told him, I said, I'm going in there. He said, no, you can't go in there. That's my granddaughter in there, and I think I have a right to go in there. He said, there's a lot of evidence in there, but there was nobody proved with it.
The killer had tried to clean up the crime scene. A towel was in the bathtub, a bleach bottle and 2 dishwashing liquid bottles were on the floor. A soapy knife, suspected to be the murder weapon, was found in the kitchen sink. The police also collected a DNA sample from Brooke's body that did not belong to her. Brooke's vibrant future had met a horrifying end in her own home. Police were determined to give the young woman the justice she deserved. The forensics team sent the DNA sample from Brooke's body for analysis. They also collected other materials from the crime scene that would be useful in the investigation. The police began by questioning Bron, who reluctantly revealed that his sister Brooke had been romantically involved with another student. The police pursued the lead and were able to contact and question Brooke's boyfriend. According to her boyfriend, they'd attended a party the night before her body was found. Brooke had left the party early, while he remained behind. The boyfriend's alibi, however, couldn't be confirmed due to the influence of alcohol on him and his friends while at the party. The police then reached out to Brooke's journalism teachers and peers, hoping to uncover potential suspects. During their inquiries, they learned about her investigative work regarding the campus fraternities. Brooke's friend told the police that the fraternity members were angry at Brooke for exposing their secrets. They'd left a threatening note on her door at the previous house, warning her to stop writing the story.
The threats came in her first year of school, close to the end of the school semester. It was the fraternity.
Determined, the police decided to question the fraternity members and possible witnesses. The police had 3 main theories about who could have killed Brooke. The first theory pointed to the campus fraternity members who were displeased with Brooke's investigation at Vincennes University. The police interviewed several fraternity members, including 2 of Brooke's friends who were in the frat. They all denied any involvement in Brooke's murder, but the police added them to the list of suspects. The list kept growing as the police continued their investigation. The second theory involved Brooke's landlord, who was also a campus police officer and had a key to Brooke's house.
No
He told
barking.
friends and family that he'd often enter her apartment without warning or
No
permission.
barking.
One night he shone a flashlight into her bedroom while she was sleeping. Another night he came in while she was taking a shower. Brooke had felt uncomfortable and scared by his behavior. The police believed that he may have used his key to get into her apartment that night and killed her after a confrontation. There were also troubling allegations against him, as some women had accused him of voyeuristic behavior on campus. However, when the landlord was questioned, he refuted the claim of unauthorized entry, claiming that he entered for pest control purposes. He maintained that he'd been at work throughout the night when Brooke was murdered. The third theory pointed to an unknown suspect, a John Doe who had pretended to be a potential roommate. Brooke had placed an ad in the campus newspaper seeking a roommate, and the police believed that this John Doe may have seen it and contacted her. She may have let him in, thinking he's interested in renting the room, and then he attacked and killed her. This theory was supported by the fact that there was no sign of forced entry in her apartment. The police had the DNA sample of the killer, which they obtained from Brooke's body. They tested the landlord and Brooke's boyfriend, but neither of them matched the DNA, so they were eventually ruled out as suspects. Because John Doe was unknown and mostly a theory, there was no way to pursue him. As the investigation deepened, the focus shifted back to the fraternity members. Approximately 65 males willingly provided DNA samples. Regrettably, none of the samples matched the killer's DNA. There was no other physical evidence or witnesses to link anyone to the crime. The police even questioned Brooke's cousin, who'd lived with her for a while before moving to California 1 week before her murder. However, the cousin was uncooperative and refused to answer any questions from the investigators. The police didn't know what she knew about the case, or if she was involved in it. The police were frustrated and baffled by the lack of leads. They wondered who could have killed Brooke and why. There were no witnesses to the crime, and the DNA sample didn't match anyone in the criminal database. The police searched for the killer across different states and took DNA samples from many people, but none of them matched. Brooke's parents, along with other family and friends, were desperately hoping for answers, but the police were unable to find the murderer. The distraught family buried Brooke in Wheatland Cemetery in Knox County, Indiana. It was a sad day for the Baker family and the Vincennes community at large. Nevertheless, the family did not give up. They hoped that someone would come forward with new information or evidence that would help solve the mystery of their daughter's murder.
Someone that's listening to me tonight has that answer concerning my daughter's murder.
I'm willing to die. I'm willing to give up my life. Find out the truth on Brooke. I can't live without justice for Brooke. I can't go on with my own life. That's all I can think. I want justice.
Despite all efforts, Brooke Baker's case soon went cold until the spring of 1999. On July 5, 1999, the police got a call about a missing student at Vincennes University, and they rushed to the flat of 21-year-old Erica Norman. As knocks on the door went unanswered, the police felt a sense of dread. They broke in and found a scene of horror that was oddly familiar. It was a slaughterhouse that eerily matched another case. Erica Elaine Norman was born in Crawfordsville, Indiana, on November 13, 1977, to Kenneth and Elaine Norman. Erica grew up in a happy and large family, with 3 siblings and several nieces and nephews. She also adored her dog, Smokey. Erica was a standout student, and her academic prowess was matched by her passion for extracurricular activities, such as softball, gymnastics, singing, and her involvement in the drama club, science club, and the Spanish Honor Society. Her enthusiasm for learning extended to exploring different cultures. At Vincennes University, she pursued radio and television studies, fueled by her passion for media and communication. While at college, Erica worked part-time jobs where her kindness and humor endeared her to colleagues. She treasured her high school, college, and sorority friends who loved her for her cheerful and caring personality. However, on July 4, 1999, Erica's life took a dark turn. That night, she was seen leaving a local restaurant with a stranger she met there. The next day, she was reported missing by her friends who hadn't seen her since the previous night. On July 5, 1999, when investigators arrived to reach Erica Norman's apartment, they were shocked to discover a nearly identical crime scene to Brooke Baker's.
It was very strange. I walked in the door and took one tour around the apartment, and I called Greg Winkler. And I said, "You need to get over here." And I told him we have it again. I just knew.
However, Erica's body was nowhere to be found. There was no sign of forced entry, yet the apartment looked like the scene of a violent struggle. There was blood splattered on the walls, a lamp that had been smashed, and a table that had been knocked over. A pair of shorts stained with blood were also lying on the floor. The bathroom was equally disturbing. The police found a bottle of bleach on the counter and couch cushions soaking in the bathtub. The water was still running from the faucet, just like it had been in Brooke's apartment. It seemed that the killer tried to clean up the evidence, but had left in a hurry. The police learned that Erica had been at a bar called the Green Parrot the night before she disappeared. She'd been seen with a man named Brian Jones, who had bought her drinks and danced with her. The name Brian Jones carried an unsettling familiarity. It turned out that this very Brian Jones had been the roommate of Brooks' boyfriend at the time Brooke had been murdered 2 years ago. The police tracked down Brian and took him to the station for questioning. He was very agreeable and friendly. He confessed that he'd met Erica at the bar and accompanied her to her apartment to watch a movie. He claimed that Erica fell asleep on the couch and he'd left her apartment quietly. Brian seemed very cooperative with the detectives who were investigating Erica's disappearance. He agreed to give them his DNA sample and the clothes he'd worn the previous night with Erica at the restaurant. He also allowed them to search his car and house without any resistance. Brian had no criminal record. The police began searching for Erica's body and even sought help from the public. 2 weeks after her disappearance, on July 20th, 1999, Erica's body was discovered in a plastic tub in a cornfield in Lawrence County, Illinois.
A farmer was going by one of his fields, and he walked into the field about 40 or 50 feet in, and he found Erica.
Based on the DNA evidence recovered from Erica's body, the police charged Brian Jones with killing her. The police also suspected that Brian held the key to unlocking a cold case from 2 years earlier, Brooke Baker's murder. Brian had left town shortly after Brooke was killed, but he'd returned in 1999. He was now the prime suspect in both murders, since the crime scene and method in both cases were disturbingly familiar. The police still had the unknown DNA sample they'd retrieved from Brooke's body. They decided to test Brian's DNA against it. The result was a perfect match. The police suspected that Brian had visited Brooke's house after a party. Brooke had let him in since she considered him a friend. However, Brian had another motive and tried to force himself on Brooke. When she resisted, he assaulted and killed her. He then tried to wash away the blood and DNA in the bathtub. Brian Jones was charged with the murder of Brooke Baker as well. In 2000, Brian Jones faced separate trials for killing Erica Norman and Brooke Baker. Brian confessed to murdering Erica, but he pleaded not guilty to the assault and murder of Brooke. The prosecution presented a compelling case against Brian, showcasing evidence of arguments indicating his involvement in Brooke's murder. They demonstrated Brooke's whereabouts before her death, the presence of a knife with her DNA in the sink, and Brian's connections to her. Brian's party attendance on the night of the murder, a suspicious scratch on his face, and inconsistencies in his statements further raised suspicion. DNA evidence linked him to the crime scene, and his recent rental of a movie featuring a similar murder scene added to the case against him. However, Brian's attorneys claimed that the evidence presented was insufficient to convict him of murder. They argued that the evidence did not prove that he'd assaulted and killed Brooke Baker. There was no way to conclusively prove that the intercourse happened at the same time as the murder, that it was forced by him, or that he was the one who stabbed her. Brian's attorneys claimed that the evidence only raised suspicion and possibilities, not certainty beyond a reasonable doubt. The prosecutors, however, disagreed and said that the convictions for murder and assault were supported by circumstantial evidence and the reasonable inferences that could be drawn from it. They highlighted the presence of Brian's DNA on Brooke's fingernails and intimate areas, the scratch on his face the day after the murder, and the similarity of the murder scene to a movie that he'd rented shortly before. Brian's attorneys claimed that the trial court wrongly excluded a statement that Brooke herself had made shortly before she was killed. The night before her body was found in her apartment, a friend had walked Brooke home and they'd seen her landlord drive by. Brooke had told her friend that she was scared of the landlord. The trial court had agreed with the prosecution's request to keep this evidence out, but Brian's team argued that this evidence should be allowed because it fits the present sense impression exception to Indiana's hearsay rule, meaning that if someone sees something and tells someone else about it right away, their statement can be used as evidence even if they're not in court. On December 14, 2000, Brian Jones was found guilty of assaulting and killing Brooke Baker. The trial court, following the jury's recommendation, sentenced him to a life sentence without parole. He was also sentenced to 60 years for the murder of Erica Norman and got an extra 20 years for the assault conviction. Brian Jones is currently serving out his sentence in the Wabash Valley Correctional Facility in Sullivan County, Indiana. Brooks' father, Maurice Baker, was pleased with the sentence. "We're satisfied. We know we have the right person, and maybe he won't be able to harm anyone anymore," he said.
Putting a face to this animal, it helps a little bit. It will still be something that we will deal with the rest of our lives.
He sat in that courtroom with no expression, stone cold, no remorse. Inhuman.
Sadly, Brooks' mother, Janet Baker, passed away in 2004. However, Brooks' brother, Braun, still fondly remembers his sister and the happy memories of growing up together. "It's really hard to have a favorite memory of her because we were so close in age. All of my childhood memories involved her," he said. Brooke is also fondly remembered by her friends and teachers at Vincennes University. Michael Mullen, a former English and journalism professor at the university, described Brooke as a lively and ambitious student. "When she was around, you knew she was there." Brooke was ambitious, fearless, and had a great personality. She wasn't afraid to approach people and loved to learn new things, he said. To honor Brooke's spirit and passion for journalism, the Indiana Collegiate Press Association, ICPA, created an award in her name in 1999. The Brooke Baker Indiana Collegiate Journalist of the Year Award is given every year to an Indiana college student journalist who's inspired to make a difference in the world with their writing. Justice can be delayed, but not denied. Brooke Baker's family and friends had to wait for 2 years before her killer was arrested and convicted. They had not given up on finding out who killed their beloved daughter and friend. Do you think that justice was served for Brooke Baker and Erica Norman? Do you agree with the court's sentence, or would a death sentence have been more fitting for the crimes Brian Jones committed? We hope Brooke's story inspires you to stand for the truth and what you believe in. Let her story move you to stand strong in the face of injustice, as she did.
Jacksonville 911.
Yes, sir. Hi. This is, I went out to play this afternoon. I thought she was with her, and now she's missing.
How old is she?
She's 8 years old.
What's her name?
Short. Her name is Maddie. She goes as
What's her
Madeline.
last name?
Clifton. Clif as in Frank. Ton.
When's the last time anybody saw her?
About 5:30 was the last time we saw her. And I was letting the kids play out here for a little while. And then she disappeared. And nobody knows where she's at.
On November 3rd, 1998, 8-year-old Maddie Clifton mysteriously vanished from the street outside her home in Jacksonville, Florida. That was a safer time, and such crimes were unusual. So panic and concern spread like wildfire, compelling the entire neighborhood to unite in a desperate search for the little girl. However, there was one person in the search party who was pretending to look for Maddie, but was actually the one who had ruthlessly taken her life. But the killer could not hide the truth for too long. The details of the incident would shock the community and leave families reeling for years. So what happened to Maddie? Who had murdered her, and why? Located in the northeastern corner of the Sunshine State of Florida, Jacksonville in Duval County is a vibrant and diverse city offering a perfect blend of modern amenities and natural beauty. With its stunning coastline, riverfront views, and a rich cultural scene, Jacksonville has something to offer every visitor as well as resident. As Florida's largest city by area, Jacksonville boasts a unique mix of neighborhoods, each with its own charm and personality. Its 875 square miles hosts about 970,000 people. From the historic streets of Riverside and Avondale to the bustling downtown area, there is always something exciting to explore. The locals, known to be warm and friendly, also take pride in their city's natural beauty. Jacksonville's lifestyle revolves around sports and recreational activities. Residents can often be found enjoying the outdoors and playing sports. It was what 8-year-old Maddie Clifton wanted to do that fateful evening when she disappeared. The afternoon of November 3rd, 1998 was a regular day in the Lakewood neighborhood of Jacksonville. Maddie, having returned from school, went to a neighbor's place and knocked at the door to see if her friend, Joshua Phillips, wanted to play. 14-year-old Joshua was up in his bedroom playing on his computer when he heard the knock, but his father had forbidden him from playing with the girl. Maddie's neighbor and friend, Joshua Earl Patrick Phillips, was born on March 17, 1984, in Allentown, Pennsylvania. His parents, Steve and Melissa Phillips, raised Joshua in a strict household where the real control rested in his father's hands. Steve was a computer specialist by profession who had problems with drugs and alcohol. It made him violent towards Melissa and Joshua, so both mother and son lived in fear of him. Steve had strict rules for his son and didn't like it when other kids visited their home when he wasn't there. He especially didn't like young girls, and Melissa could never figure out why. Eventually, Steve decided to move the family to Jacksonville, Florida. Joshua had always been close to his half-brothers, Daniel and Benji, going to concerts and movies together. The move to Florida meant the boys would be separated. Even Daniel and Benji pleaded with their father not to take Joshua to Florida and split up the family, but their father didn't listen. Joshua had no choice but to leave his half-brothers behind and start a new life. However, Joshua had a talent for making friends and getting along with people. He was known to be a funny kid, always cracking jokes and making others laugh. So, shortly after moving to Florida, he managed to make new friends and was well liked by his classmates. He was a 9th grader with a C average at Philip Randolph Academies of Technology, but he was passionate about sports. He especially loved playing baseball with other kids in his neighborhood. But not all of Joshua's playmates were boys. Through common love for sport, he met one of his regular baseball partners, Maddie, who lived right across the street. Madeline Ray Clifton, popularly known as Maddie, was born on June 17, 1990, to Sheila and Steve Clifton. She grew up in Jacksonville, Florida, with her older sister Jessie, during a time when kids had the freedom to play outside without worry. She attended San Jose Catholic School as a 3rd grader. Maddie was a joyful and outgoing child, a bit of a tomboy who loved playing basketball for her school team. She also had a fondness for baseball. Together, 14-year-old Joshua and 8-year-old Maddie made a dynamic duo on the neighborhood streets, one pitching and the other swinging. The proximity of their houses helped them spend more time together and became friends, disregarding the 6-year age gap. But Joshua's dad had given him a serious warning about staying away from Maddie, saying she was too young to be his friend. And he obeyed his father's words because he knew how angry and scary his dad could be. So on that day, November 3rd, 1988, around 5 p.m. when Maddie came over, Joshua was hesitant to play with her. But Maddie persisted until Joshua finally gave in reluctantly. His parents weren't at home, so Joshua decided to play with Maddie for a while and send her off quickly before his father came back. By then, the sun was setting on the horizon, and they went outside to start tossing the baseball back and forth. The evening air was cool, but the atmosphere was tense. Joshua couldn't shake the feeling that he was doing something wrong, but Maddie seemed so happy to be playing with him. But as time went on, Joshua knew he had to keep his promise to his dad. It was around 6:30 p.m. when Maddie's mother, Sheila, called out to her and her older sister, Jessie, to come inside for dinner. 11-year-old Jessie came back inside, but she couldn't find her little sister anywhere. Sheila searched every corner of the yard, feeling increasingly worried. With no sign of Maddie as the sky darkened, Sheila rushed back into the house to call for help. She dialed 911 and reported that her daughter was missing.
Jacksonville 911.
Yes, sir. Hi. This is. I went out to play this afternoon. I thought she was with her, and now she's missing.
How old is she?
She's 8 years old.
What's her name?
Short. Her name is Maddie. She goes as
What's her
Madeline.
last name?
Clifton. Clif as in Frank. Ton.
When's the last time anybody saw her?
About 5:30 was the last time we saw her. And I was letting the kids play out here for a little while. And then she disappeared. And nobody knows where she's at.
Within minutes, police units from the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office were on their way to the Clifton house. Maddie's father, Steve, arrived soon after. The whole neighborhood was alerted, and everyone joined the search for the young girl. With flashlights in hand, the community banded together, determined to find Maddie. Police officers, neighbors, and friends combed the streets, parks, and alleys, hoping to catch a glimpse of the young girl. Joshua and his parents joined the search too. He seemed just as shocked as the other neighbors looking for Maddie. As the hours passed with no sign of Maddie, concern and anxiety grew in the community. Where could Maddie be? What could have happened to her? As the days passed, the search for Maddie intensified. The police worked tirelessly, going from house to house and questioning neighbors. They hoped that someone might have noticed something unusual or seen any strangers in the neighborhood, but there were no leads. The community conducted their own individual searches and put up posters with Maddie's face. All that the police had until then was that Maddie had disappeared. But it seemed highly unlikely that a child playing in a residential neighborhood full of families would disappear like that without anyone noticing anything. However, the fact was that people were not afraid to let their kids roam around and play at that time. They trusted their neighbors. So even if something strange happened, nobody would have noticed it until Maddie had cried out or shouted. So there was a high possibility of a known person luring her away. But who could have done such a thing? Was there any other possibility? As the police started interviewing people, their attention quickly shifted toward a neighbor who seemed suspicious. This particular neighbor had a history of being involved in 2 battery cases over 15 years ago, although those charges had eventually been dropped. Many believed they'd finally found the culprit responsible for Maddie's disappearance. However, the police couldn't link him to Maddie in any way, and it soon became clear that they targeted the wrong man. What the police didn't suspect was that the real culprit was hiding in plain sight, living just around the corner from Maddie's family. The children in the neighborhood were deeply affected by Maddie's disappearance and struggled to understand what had happened to their friend. Police took turns interviewing the kids in the neighborhood. They also spoke to Joshua, who seemed equally upset and had no information to share. Several flyers were distributed, and a $50,000 reward was promised to anyone who could provide useful information about Maddie. Then, on the morning of November 10th, 1998, the mystery took a shocking turn. Joshua went to school as usual, and his mother, Melissa, kissed him goodbye. She then went about her daily chores. She needed to tidy Joshua's room and had been hesitating to do it, given how stressed Joshua was about Maddie's disappearance. However, she knew it was time to do so because his room had a strange smell. Entering her son's upstairs bedroom, Melissa thought she saw the source of the problem. There was a small puddle at the foot of Joshua's waterbed. She thought that perhaps the spilled water was causing the stench. She grabbed one end of the mattress and peeled it back from the baseboard. Almost immediately, she let it go and took a step back. Then she was turning and running down the stairs and out into the street, where she found a police officer. There was a human foot poking out from under Joshua's waterbed. In no time, police cars flooded the Jacksonville neighborhood, and sirens were wailing in the street outside the Phillips house. As the investigation unfolded, authorities found more gruesome evidence in Joshua's room. Hidden within the confines of his seemingly ordinary bedroom were the remains of 8-year-old Maddie. She was found unclothed from the waist down. Officers swiftly cordoned off the Phillips residence with crime scene tape to control the growing crowd. Among them were Sheila and Steve Clifton, who had just wrapped up an interview with a media channel. They were anxiously wondering what was happening and praying it had nothing to do with their daughter. The truth was finally revealed when a police officer approached Sheila and escorted her back home. She knew something was wrong. The police officers took Maddie's sister, Jessie, to IHOP, a pancake restaurant chain. And that's when the officer told Sheila that Maddie's lifeless body had been discovered hidden under Joshua Phillips's bed.
Well, if you look behind me, this is the home where Josh Phillips lived. That far right window was his bedroom, where Maddie Clifton's body was found under his bed. Just across the street is where Clifton's home was. Her sister just moved in.
And I remember walking in to the IHOP and seeing a missing persons poster on the window walking into
The family was in disbelief, which quickly turned to anger and grief. How could someone they'd known, someone who had played with other children in the neighborhood, be capable of such a heinous act? Sheila stated that Joshua and her daughter had been friends, and she had no reason to fear him or believe that he could have done this to her. As the news spread, the residents couldn't believe how a young teenage boy could kill a child and stay quiet about it for so long. Police officers had checked the Phillips residence 3 times earlier and even interviewed Joshua in his room, but had failed to notice anything. The smell of the corpse had been masked by the multiple birds that the Phillips family kept as pets. The most disturbing part was that Joshua had been sleeping on the same bed for an entire week, knowing very well that under it lay the corpse of an innocent girl who was once his friend. He'd even participated in the search to find her, when he clearly knew she was lying dead in his own room. As CSI units combed the scene, a patrol car raced towards Joshua's school with an urgent mission. They needed to bring him to the local police station for questioning. Inside the station, detectives sat him down in the presence of his parents, as he was only 14 and underage. Joshua knew he couldn't deny his involvement in Maddie's death, so instead he weaved a tale. According to Joshua, Maddie had come to his door, excited to play a game of baseball together. He reluctantly agreed, fearing what his father would say if he found out. But as they played, an accident happened. His powerful swing made the ball strike Maddie in the face, causing her to cry out in pain. Fear surged through him as he realized the severity of the injury. She was bleeding from a gash above her eye. Joshua wasn't supposed to be playing with Maddie, and now he'd not only defied his father, but also hurt her. He knew his father would be home soon, and facing his wrath terrified him. In a moment of panic, he decided to carry Maddie to his room, hoping to soothe her and keep her quiet. Joshua explained that he dragged Maddie to his room, trying to hush her cries. Despite being dragged on the ground like that, the bottom part of her clothes had come off. Maddie was continuously crying and bleeding. He didn't want to get into trouble, and he certainly didn't want Maddie's parents to know it was his fault Maddie had been hurt. So instead, he made a decision that would change everything. He hit her on the head twice using the baseball bat and used his pocket knife to stab her throat. Joshua didn't want anyone to find out that he'd accidentally hurt Maddie, so he intentionally killed her. Then, considering the job done, he hid Maddie's body under his waterbed, desperate to erase all evidence. At that time, his father Steve returned home. Joshua interacted with his father for some time and came back to his room. He found that Maddie was still alive and moaning in pain. Worried that his father would hear her, Joshua pulled her out, slit her throat open, and stabbed her in the chest. This time, Maddie went still. He pushed her body under the mattress once again and went out of the house to join in the search to find her. But little did he know that his terrible secret would soon be exposed. And what was even worse, the detective suspected Joshua was lying about his motive. Joshua had claimed that everything started because of an accident. Ironically, that was the biggest flaw in his story. The ball that he claimed hit Maddie in the face had no traces of blood on it. Even the yard was clear of any blood traces. The autopsy report revealed the details that Joshua had tried to hide. Maddie hadn't been stabbed just twice, but a total of 9 times, of which 7 stab wounds were on the chest. The cruelty of the attack was unimaginable. Not only that, the autopsy uncovered yet another truth. Maddie had suffered a blow to her head so powerful that it fractured her skull. And the most devastating revelation of all was that Maddie had still been alive when Joshua had hidden her under the bed. The pain and fear she must have endured was unbearable to think about. She would have waited for someone to come and rescue her as she was taking her last breaths. Joshua could only say that he'd spent the previous week in complete denial. He just assumed that nothing happened and was believing that theory. It was his defense mechanism since childhood, and he claimed he did not intentionally choose to ignore the incident or the severity of it. While Joshua said that, his father, Steve, placed some of the blame on Maddie herself. He believed that if the girl hadn't come over, none of it would have happened.
I'm here to announce the arrest of Joshua Earl Patrick Phillips.
On the same day, November 10th, 1998, Joshua Phillips was charged with first-degree murder. Given the severity of the crime, it was decided he'd face trial as an adult. However, the trial was moved from Duval County to Polk County in Florida due to publicity concerns and to avoid judicial bias. On July 6, 1999, the first day of the trial, the courtroom was packed due to the intense media coverage of the case. Joshua's defense team, headed by lawyer Richard D. Nichols, stuck to the same story he told the police. However, the prosecution presented a different theory. They believed it was a motivated crime. Even though the autopsy found no evidence of that sort of assault, Maddie's body was found unclothed from the waist down. The police discovered that Joshua had been looking at violent images online just before the murder, raising suspicions that it might have influenced his actions. Maddie's sister, Jessie, testified that Joshua had in the past spoken to her and Maddie about adding weight to the prosecution's argument. State Attorney Harry Shorstein also said that no dirt or sand was found on Maddie's clothes to suggest that she'd been dragged. Throughout the trial, the defense sought to present crucial evidence to support Joshua's case. They presented brain scans taken by a neurologist, revealing bilateral lesions on the frontal lobe of Joshua's brain. These specific brain abnormalities have been linked to panic responses and impaired judgment. They contended that the lesions might have influenced his decision-making and emotional responses, possibly contributing to his panicked reaction during the tragic events surrounding Maddie's death. Joshua's lawyer, Richard D. Nichols, said in his closing statement that Maddie's death was an act that began as an accident and deteriorated through panic that bordered on madness. The jury deliberated for only 2 hours before finding Joshua Phillips guilty as charged. He couldn't get the death penalty because he was under 16, So on August 20th, 1999, the judge handed him a life sentence in prison without the chance of parole. This decision was upheld on appeal in 2002.
It was a very emotional day today for two families after Josh Phillips, Maddie Clifton's killer, receives a life prison sentence for the second time.
So a Supreme Court decision ruled it unconstitutional to impose a life sentence on juveniles. So Phillips, now 33 years old, was granted a resentencing hearing, but once again, he was sentenced to life in prison.
Presently, Joshua Phillips is serving a sentence at the Cross City Correctional Institution in Dixie County, Florida. In 2012, there was a glimmer of hope for him when the U.S. Supreme Court declared that sentencing juveniles to life without parole is unconstitutional. As a result, a new sentencing hearing is currently pending. While behind bars, Joshua Phillips made a statement. She was a little girl who did not deserve to die. Joshua knew what he'd done and decided to spend most of his time pursuing education. Despite being told he was too young, he successfully completed his General Education Development, or GED, tests. He even went on to take college classes through correspondence. Behind prison walls, Joshua also found purpose in helping others. Working as a paralegal, he assists fellow inmates with their legal appeals. Additionally, he serves as a tutor, guiding fellow prisoners on their educational journeys. He plays guitar in a band and has also found solace in religious practices, participating in Christian services, zazen, and yoga.
He's playing guitar in a rock band. He phones me up now and says, "Can you get on YouTube and play Green Eyed Lady by Sugarloaf so I can see if I got the guitar part right?"
Over time, Joshua has earned recognition for his positive behavior and demeanor while incarcerated. Even during his 2017 appeal, the prosecution acknowledged him as a model prisoner. Despite his personal growth, some wounds remain unhealed. In 2008, Joshua declined to write a letter of apology to Maddie Clifton's grieving family, stating that he believed they deserved an in-person apology to truly see his sincerity. However, Maddie's mother, Sheila, expressed no interest in meeting with him.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for what happened.
I applaud him for being able to get up and do what he did because I know that was hard. Forgiveness is not in my hands. I am a Christian. I believe in God. And I feel like at the end of the day, that's not my job.
Outside of prison, both the families continue to deal with tragedy. Following the trial, Maddie's parents eventually got divorced, while Joshua's father, Steve Phillips, passed away in a car accident on June 27, 2000. As of the latest available information, Joshua Phillips, now 39 years old, continues to serve his life sentence in Cross City Correctional Institution. His journey serves as a poignant reminder that actions can have lasting consequences, and the path to redemption is often paved with difficult choices and personal growth. The loss of a young life is always a devastating blow, as it leaves behind a void that can never be filled. While justice was served with the conviction of Joshua Phillips, it can never undo the pain and heartache that Maddie's family and the community endured. It prompts us to consider the importance of early intervention and mental health support for troubled teenagers. It also emphasizes the need to foster a compassionate environment in the house that nurtures its young members. Even though Joshua was the one who committed these violent acts, it cannot be ignored that his father was not a great role model, especially when he could blame an 8-year-old victim. Irrespective of Joshua's motives, do you think Steve Phillips was somehow responsible for teaching his son that violence was the key to all problems? Do you believe Joshua's story?
Belle Gunness, the Black Widow of the Midwest, a woman who loved her husbands to death, a woman who brought death wherever she went.